Okay, so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about using social technologies for connected learning. This is a little bit about me. So I coordinate the Library and Information Education program. I teach in that program. I also teach social technologies. I research information experience, social media, and teaching and learning. And all of those things come together because people's information experience in social media is critical in learning environments. I like to chase better ways of doing things and challenge. I get bored easily, and I like to build capacity through training and working with my students, and also I like to build things I shouldn't, and we'll look at some of those in a minute. So who knows what I'm talking about when I say connected learning? A few? Okay. So there's a great definition put out, you can find it at connectedlearning.tv, there's a really cool infographic there. Basically, connected learning is about fusing interests, friendships, and academic achievements through experiences laced with hands-on production, shared purpose, and open networks. So it's focused on production, it's about having a shared purpose as a group, and it's about using open networks, which means that students can interact in the classroom, on campus outside the classroom, and also at home within this connected learning community. It allows students to pursue their interests. It's based around a peer culture, so we're all in it together, and allows them to also pursue academic pursuits at the same time. So I'm going to give you 6 tips for using social technologies to build a connected learning environment, and you can read lots more about connected learning around the place, and I'll reveal some other bits as we go through. The first thing you need to do in order to realise connected learning is have a space in which to do it. I was just talking about this with one of my students who's going to be speaking to you shortly. I usually run a WordPress with BuddyPress site where all my students have their own blogs on the network. And that becomes our community space where we interact and have community discussions, but students also have their own spaces in there. This is one of those things that I probably shouldn't build because it's very much outside the corporate network, but connected learning works best in the wild when we're using the technologies that students use. So this is an example of a space that you can create for students to use. You also need to rewrite the rules, and this is a slide that I use at the beginning of semester when I explain how I teach to my students. My job is not to do what I'm doing right now or to pour knowledge into their head, but it's about sharing what I know, sharing my ideas and my enthusiasm for the content, curating resources for them, so pulling things together that I find in social media and online in other places. It's about facilitating conversations, experiences, and connections. And one of my biggest jobs is to manage the online community and make sure that everyone is getting something out of the community together. You can't make connected learning work as a teacher when you are standing up there as the guide on the side. So we all know about the sage on the stage, and we're moving away from that model of me standing here talking at you, but I don't actually think it's any good for me to stand on the side either. I need to be part of the learning community. And so I didn't realise one of my students would be here, and I'm about to give away something that we're going to do next week, which is that my students all love Reddit, which is a social technology tool that I don't use. So next week I'm going to ask them to teach me what I should be doing with Reddit and exactly how they think I can use it. And by kind of revealing to them what I don't know, I become a co-learner and we learn together. One other thing you need to do, I think, to achieve this connected learning model is to assess contributions. We did some research the first time that I kind of worked with this model, and what we learned was that students participated in the community, first of all, because they were assessed. So they went and commented on each other's posts, and they got involved in conversations because they knew I was watching what they were doing and they were going to get graded on it. But what they also told us was that they stayed because it was valuable. So they made their contributions, they could have got themselves a high distinction for contributing to the community, but they got enough out of it that they decided they'd stick around and keep contributing. I mentioned also that this model is about content production. So on the left-hand side of the screen here, you can see what I produce as weekly learning materials. I'm looking particularly snarly in that cover shot. This is an 8-minute weekly intro video filmed in my home office, where I introduce students to what we're talking about for the week. And then I provide them a curated set of resources that I curate into essentially a blog post with embedded references for them to follow up. But then what I ask students to do is to go off and blog themselves and to critically reflect on one of a number of discussion prompts that I give them for the week. So last week we talked about creativity, makerspaces or maker movements, and social technologies, and the role that social technologies has in supporting or driving people's creative practice or their artistic practice. So some of them are writing blog posts about issues like copyright and social technology. Others are writing blog posts about how they use social technology for their own creative practice. One of my colleagues, who's a university librarian in Melbourne, put together a story about how she uses social technology as part of her own creative existence, I guess. So we create these sets of resources for them that model what we want them to do, and then we set them loose. Each week we also give them a play activity, and last week's was pretty simple. I just asked the makers in the class to share what they make or what they do. And making doesn't have to be about craft, it can also be about making with technology as well. So what they're doing there is they're not only completing a piece of assessment, but they're creating learning resources that their peers then learn from. And I think they probably learn more from each other than they do from me. So all I'm doing is creating the space and facilitating for them. This is probably the most important thing. And I should confess this, was it last week or the week before, my students had a task to try and kick off a meme. So they had to come up with an idea for a meme and then try and propagate it and push it out. They never actually decided on one that they liked, but they made a whole lot of really cool things. And one of them posted this, and then another student commented and said, "Oh my God, I just lost my whole blog post." And then so we had a whole conversation around how she might retrieve it. It's really important for students to understand that failure is actually a way to move forward. So I encourage them to play with technology, but also I model failure. When I try something and it doesn't work, I say, that didn't work. It was a bit of a disaster, really. Let's stop and do it again. For example, last year I started live broadcasting my classes with Google Hangouts instead of the university tool. And we tried it a couple of weeks. It was basically an unmitigated disaster. And I said to the students, okay, so do we go back to a tool now that we know works, or do you want to come along for the ride and try out this other tool that I think might be cool? And in a class of almost 60 students, one person said, I wouldn't mind sticking with the one we know that's okay, but I'll go with the flow. So they all came along for the ride and it worked. But being transparent about the fact that I'd stuffed up and the solution didn't work also gave them permission to do the same thing. So my motto is, as long as we're moving, then we're moving forward. And if I'm falling forward while I fail, well, that's okay. And this is the reason why you might want to do what I do with social technologies. In a unit last year, I had 39 students. On the main site, which is where I post the learning resources and have a blog for the teaching team, we had 72 posts. There were 614 comments on that main site, and on the student blog, so that's their individual blogs across the network, there were 614 posts, which is the same number, and every time I say that I get confused, and 2,810 comments. So well over 3,000 comments across the network in a single 13-week semester from 39 students. I'm not good at maths, but I think that's a pretty good number. And these are real interesting comments. They don't get grades, they don't get marks for saying, hey, that was a nice post. They get marks for mentorship, for encouraging each other. They get marks for stimulating conversation, asking difficult questions, forming an opinion and being able to argue it with evidence. Some of the comments are, haha, that was a nice photo, but for the most part, the students are trying to actively contribute good content into the community. So this is my sales pitch for connected learning, because it really does work. And what I've learnt this semester with my current unit is that this building a single space for the community is really important. So at the moment we have a Google Plus community and students have distributed blogs across the web. The level of community isn't going to get anywhere near what I had last year with this particular community. So that is my number one principle for using social technologies to foster connected learning.
All right, fantastic. It's fast and curious enough for us to entertain one or two quick questions.
So the question was, being assessed is important, but how much real-time feedback do I give so that they know we're watching? In the early weeks of semester, we actively try and make sure we comment on at least one blog post from every student. Instead of having a tutor, I have a community manager who helps me by going through the posts and actively commenting. And we're quite critical in those early comments so they know what the expectations are. And then I say to them, okay, it's week 6, this is your community, you need to drive it. Yeah. But it is critical to facilitate at the beginning.
Okay, I'm going to facilitate this question. John?
I'm just wondering if you would be able to post some details about how you assess comments.
Sure, I'll post my rubric. I did kind of have it on the slide and then there was just so much text there, but I'm happy to do that.
I was just wondering if when you said your single space, when you said WordPress, have you got a website that you set up that you run the work from?
Yeah, I do run my own site, but EduBlogs is a good solution as well. Have you guys done much work with EduBlogs? Yeah, there's...
Run that outside of the university?
I do, yeah.
We might come back to that thorny issue about using technology not formally supported by your host organisation.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, please join with me in thanking Kate.
Thank you.